What's up, Packer fans? I'm Nariah Chapek, host of Porn Packers podcast. And after coming off of a dominating victory against the Arizona Cardinals, the 5-1 Houston Texans head to Lambeau Field for a... Wait. Why isn't this game on Sunday night? All right, so before we get rolling here, real quick, if you've not hit that comments or like, or most importantly, the subscribe button, please go ahead and do that. We have a giveaway, 1,000 subscribers. You get a canvas, big, small, whatever size you'd like, Packers related. With 2,500 subscribers, we're giving away a jersey of your choice. And then at 5,000, yes, 5,000 by the end of the season. We got a little ways to go, but if we get there, we're giving away some football tickets, preferably Packers tickets to next season, any game of your choice. But enough about that. Enough about the breakdown. Arizona Cardinals are in the rearview mirror. We came off of a decisive I say we. Do you find yourself doing that too? Probably. It's we
all the time.
When we talk about. Okay,
all the time.
Perfect. So
we're a part of it.
Packers come
we're
off
a part
of a victory. 34-13 is the final score, and everything was trending in the right direction for the most part. Matt LaFleur put it in his words the best. It was a complete game. It was a complete performance. We saw Love performing well with 4 touchdowns. We saw 9 different receivers catch the ball throughout the game. We saw a running back group that put up 179 total yards. The defense had 3 takeaways. This was a trending upward game, to say the least. Christian, what are your thoughts coming out of that Arizona Cardinals game?
That was probably the most relaxing Packer game I've watched so far this year. I was able to just sit back and enjoy. I mean, it was Packers in control from the beginning, which was nice to see. It was a refreshing week 6 win. Good to see the steps that the Packers as a team took, the steps forward that they took this week. We've just been seeing them take step forwards each week since Jordan Love has been back. So we just got to see that continue.
Yeah, and I think for the game that we're going to preview here in this episode, the Houston Texans, it was important to see that step in the right direction coming off of the previous game. It was kind of against the Rams, it was kind of an up and down battle where it seemed like we should have won that game by more than we should, or more than we ended up winning it by. And for the most part, it was complete dominance. When I look back on the first half and second half statistics play by play, we held the Cardinals to 4 punts in their first 4 possessions, and we scored on 3 of the first 4 possessions with a punt, touchdown, field goal, actually a touchdown, another possession in the first half. And then flipping it over to the second half, Arizona only got the ball 4 times. They opened with a field goal drive, but then it was fumble, and that was all she wrote for that second half. So we've seen a trend with these Packers where this defense really turns it on the second half. And once again, there was no exception to that rule on Sunday against the Cardinals.
Yeah. Over the defense played well overall. The offense was clicking. One thing that I noticed, and even the commentators on the broadcast pointed it out, in previous weeks, the Packers had found themselves in consistent 3rd and long situations, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 8, which makes it a lot more difficult to convert. This week against the Cardinals, they did end up on 3rd down fairly often, but it was 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, much more manageable and more of a position where you can take some risks and still go for it on 4th down because it's 3rd and short. So that was good to see. The run game did fairly well. Still, I don't know. We kind of talked about this outside of recording, but Josh Jacobs, it feels like he should be putting up bigger numbers than he is, but the numbers that he's putting up are still, I believe he's 4th in the league in rushing, but each game it just seems like he can't get going. And last week I attributed it to run blocking. The offensive line needed to step up a little bit, but overall he's still, I think he had 62 yards this week, which is a fairly decent day. I think maybe part of why it doesn't seem like Jacobs has been as successful as we hoped is because we just haven't seen as many touchdowns. I think once he starts scoring more touchdowns, it'll feel more real that he's, making a difference in this run game and opening things up for Jordan Love.
Yeah, and that it's interesting you bring that up, because when they played the Colts and when they played the Titans and Malik Willis was that quarterback, it seemed like that offensive line was having their way and creating bigger running lanes and more opportunities for that run game to kind of get going. And I will say this, I mean, even though Jacobs didn't have that great of how many yards did you say he had? 68 or 70 yards? 62 yards. So even though he might have not contributed a whole lot in that running game, the Packers themselves finished the game with 179 rushing yards, with a mixture between Jalen Reed end-arounds and Bo Melton end-arounds. And Wilson had a similar amount of yards. I think he was somewhere in the 50s as well as yards. So they're finding ways to rush. And as a group, the Packers have 1,100 rushing yards on the season through the first 6 weeks. That's number 2 in the league. They're finding ways to maybe not the old-fashioned give it to the running back and run up the middle, but they're getting creative with their run plays. And they're keeping a balance, too. In last week's game against the Cardinals, they had 38 rushes, and Jordan Love had 32 passing attempts. So they got this nice balance going. I think a lot of those runs came kind of in garbage time late in the fourth quarter. But this is kind of a perfect storm of what you want your offense to do and not rely too much on one thing or the other. You brought up third down. Packers went 7 for 12 against the Cardinals. A big improvement over that 1 for 8 in the previous week against the Rams. And then lastly, I would say the penalties. We've only had 5 penalties count against us for 40 yards. And that's been our absolute Achilles heel this point of the season. Outside of some defensive unnecessary roughness, I think Jair Alexander was called for. They still have no idea what that was, but there was a particular drive where they had 2 or 3 penalties in a row on the defense, and that amounts for 70% of the penalties that we got the entire game.
Yeah, cleaning up their play made a huge difference, not shooting themselves in the foot and killing drives with penalties. So that was a huge improvement as well. It's just got to stay consistent. They got to stay clean. They got to cut down on the penalties as much as possible. As long as they can do that, create turnovers like the defense did, they're going to continue to be successful, and they're going to continue taking steps forward.
So I know before we move on to the Houston game side of things, which is it's going to be a big game. It's going to be huge. We're ready to a second. But before we move forward, I know there's a couple players that we want to talk about. In particular, let's start with Romeo Doubs. Comes back after his suspension, finishes the game with 2 touchdowns. I know that kind of tugged on your heartstrings to an extent, Christian, and it did as well for me. I think for a lot of Packers fans, we were all happy to see him get into the end zone that first time, and then to follow it up with that second was very special. What are your takeaways? Is there any input on thoughts that you want to say about Romeo Doubs and his performance on Sunday?
Yeah, it was touching to see that performance that he put out. And even after the touchdowns he scored, you could tell that there's still something inside that's he's fighting. And he's come out in the media and said that he was dealing with some personal stuff or mental stuff.
If he came out with anything, it's that it wasn't what we thought it was, right?
Right.
It doesn't seem like it had to do with the amount of targets or the amount of receptions or anything.
It was all rumor.
All rumor, and we don't know what it will be, and we probably won't ever know what it will be, but we can for sure say that it wasn't football related. There's something else that he's definitely struggling with on the outside.
Yeah, it's watching that locker room interview and then watching his body language on the field after scoring 2 touchdowns. He's obviously got something going on. Like you said, we probably won't ever know what it is, but it was really, really awesome to see his teammates rally around him after that first touchdown that he scored. He didn't celebrate. He didn't do any touchdown dance or anything like that. He hugged his best buddy in the wide receiver room, Christian Watson, gave him a big hug, and then the rest of the offense rallied around him. And I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it, honestly, because it was that moving. It was that emotional. And I haven't talked about this, but I lost my best friend this year to mental health. So it was a big deal to see that team rally around a guy who obviously is dealing with something. So great to see the team rally around him. Great to see him have that type of performance after what happened last week. Hopefully that's it. Hopefully, he just continues to get better and we don't hear anything else going on with it. He just continues to get better and continue to play well.
Yeah, I have a feeling that that's probably the end of the chapter, and I agree with you. I hope we don't hear anything. I don't really think we will hear a whole lot after it come out, have that type of performance. And it was awesome to see. Additionally, I want to bring up the rookie defensive players. Evan Williams just is continuing to impress back-to-back weeks now. You had actually pointed out to me yesterday that Williams and Xavier McKinney were the two highest graded safeties in week 6 of the NFL, with Williams actually getting the slight nod. So he had that big stop on Kyler Murray on I think it was a 3rd or a 4th down. I still haven't figured out what that answer was yet, but he had a big tackle and stop from picking up a 1st down. And then Edgerrin Cooper has continued to look great. He's really just being able to get through that offensive line and get into the backfield and make tackles. He's got speed. He's got tackling ability. He's got great instincts. We're seeing that very early on this season. And then Bullard, of course, we can't leave him out of the conversation, although he maybe didn't make the highlight reel all that much last week. He's another contributor from this rookie class that are all having huge roles on this defense. And it's really going to be interesting to see how this plays out with maybe a Stokes or a Nixon or a Ballantyne on how they're going to shuffle these guys around, who's going to get more playing time. Because these rookies are here to stay, and I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, right? It's a good problem to have, figuring out how you're going to get these standout guys on the field because there's so many of them. It's a great problem to have. I'm very excited about this defense. It's looked very good. Obviously, week in and week out, they've created turnovers and wreaked havoc, made a huge difference in every one of the wins that the Packers have. So, yeah, it's fun to watch. It's a lot more fun than previous years.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I remember, last year I made so many turnover Jell-O shots, and they just sat because they just couldn't do it. And now it's just out of control. It's been out of control. It's been a lot of fun. Xavier McKinney, got to bring him up. He did not get an interception last week, which is really disappointing because Packers.com or NFL, one of those two, they actually had him mic'd up for the entire game last week. And quite frankly, Kyler Murray did not throw it his direction. He maybe had one opportunity where he was even in the vicinity that he could have had a possible interception. Otherwise, the ball just never traveled over his direction.
Yeah, well, and it could be because they're avoiding him, right?
I'd avoid him. I think we're probably going to see more of that in the coming weeks.
I think I saw,
at least until he gets his next one.
I think I saw today he tweeted or posted on social media something about if they're trying to throw the ball deep on him, he takes offense to it. So yeah, it makes sense that teams are avoiding throwing the deep ball against him because he's taken it away so many times this year. So you got teams avoiding throwing against McKinney. Jair is back. It was great to see him back as well. I know Marvin Harrison went out early with an injury, but there was one specific play where Jair was in coverage on Marvin Harrison Jr. and locked him up, broke up the pass, and I think that was a play Harrison got injured on. But it was overall a good play by Alexander. Unfortunate that Harrison got hurt, but great to see Jair back because he's a difference maker as well.
Two more players that I want to bring up real quick. Let's start with Jordan Love. Again, finished 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, which I can't, hold that one against him. Bo Melton slipped in the field conditions. That whole stadium went through like 4 different seasons on Sunday, and it started with monsoon. So I'm not going to hold that one against Jordan Love, but he does. Actually, he's tied for 2nd in the league. He's only played 4 games this season, tied with 12 total touchdowns on the season. Did you see enough improvement week over week that he looks like he's going to be ready enough for the challenge when it comes to Houston?
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I mentioned before, I think the whole team in general took a step forward, and that includes Jordan Love. He made better decisions. Like we mentioned last week, I wanted to see more high percentage throws, can't always go for it all. Don't have to have a deep ball every drive. And throughout the entire game against the Cardinals, I specifically noticed he'd look downfield. It wasn't there right away. So he'd check it down to his safety net. And he continued to do that throughout the game. And it kept drives going. It kept his completion percentage high. That's exactly what he needed to do. He needed to get back to basics, stop taking so many chances. And he did take some chances. There was that throw across the middle to Christian Watson that at first glance, it looked like it was going to be a bad decision. There was 3 defenders around Watson. It was the type of thing where I covered my eyes because I thought for sure it was getting picked. But it was the perfect throw. It was right on the money. It was in a spot where only Watson could get to it. And I think that might have been a 4th down play even.
It was 4th down. And there's 2 passes in particular that tell me that he's trending, maybe not even trending in the right direction, that he might be back to the Jordan Love that we remember from the end of last season. It's that particular throw, because you brought this up in our previous discussions, that throw to Christian Watson where he's threading the needle right in the right spot reminded you of that Cowboys game where he sidearmed it to Romeo in the end zone. It's just like, okay, that requires skill. That requires maybe a little bit of luck, but a hell of a lot of skill too. The other throw that I am, I guess, talking about is the one to Christian Watson. And the reason I want to bring that, it seems like he had plenty of time in the pocket. It seems like a routine play, but we've seen when he hasn't been quite himself, him maybe overthrow that or maybe throw it a little bit behind or even throw it low. We didn't see a whole lot of low passes on Sunday against the Cardinals like we saw in the previous weeks. So it seems like his leg's getting better, but he's able to connect on those long balls. He's able to thread the needle. There's one more pass that I think a lot of the NFL has given attention to, and it's that second touchdown to Romeo in the corner where he's dropping back and back legs it. That one still makes me a little bit nervous because that feels like a 50-50 ball, but he happened to get away with it this time and Romeo came down. But I would agree. I think we're getting back to full health Jordan Love, and that's going to spell a really good, recipe or make a really good recipe as we head into this Houston game.
Yeah. Like I said, it's just got to continue. The steps forward just have to continue. You got to get better each week. And that's what Matt LaFleur is preaching in that locker room on the practice field. It's just getting better each week. You even heard Jordan Love say that throughout the preseason. Everyone's just trying to get better each week, trying to take steps forward, trying to get better. So they just got to continue to do that.
So what was the one downside or the one blip in the Packers' decisive victory on Sunday? Do you know where I'm going with this?
I think I do. Does it have to do with kicking the ball?
It does have to do with kicking the ball. So the only time where I was like, gosh, this team sucks is specifically when Narvison missed that field goal. And it was the first time I hopped on X account and I put it out there into the internet and I text you, I text some other people. I'm like, this is going to be his last week. There was no pressure whatsoever on that kick, and for it to not even be close is a concern. But we got some good news. So we got some breaking news as of Tuesday. We're recording this on Wednesday night, by the way. So as of yesterday, Packers have moved on from Narvison, and we are now on our 7th kicker since the season ended last year. And we have moved on to Brandon McManus, who is veteran kicker, kicked with the Jacksonville Jaguars for 9 years. We talked about him on previous episodes. He was facing some misconduct stuff, and he was suspended, but all the charges were dropped. We had discussed whether or not they would maybe take the risk of picking him up, but it sounds like there's not a whole lot there in that suit. It sounds a little bit like it was a fluff piece, if you will. So we get a new kicker, and I have to, I guess, ask you, is this our last kicker this season?
I don't want to answer that question because you never know. Honestly, this is probably our best option, our best bet at solidifying the kicker position. Like you mentioned, we talked about McManus for the last couple of weeks. So it's great to see that finally they got him signed and looks like he's going to be the guy. I haven't watched it, but there was a bunch of stuff after they had practiced today. There was video footage of his first practice with the team. Did you watch any of that? Okay. I haven't either. I mean, it's based on what I was seeing as far as the comments about it. It sounds like it went well. So hopefully, fingers crossed that they got this figured out now.
And that's the thing. I mean, with Narvison, I think part of the reason why they hung on to him so long was that he was practicing well. And that's what they were telling us, right? He had a great week of practice, and then he came out, and again, he missed a kick in every single game so far this year. And only one of them was called, the penalty was called, so it didn't count. He had a perfect game, but I'm glad the decision was made. It's a hard decision to make. It's such a crucial spot. I mean, if we had a consistent kicking game against the Vikings a few weeks ago, maybe that game goes a little bit different. I don't know. There's a whole lot that went wrong in that game, but that's 6 points off the board that can reshape that entire game. And you just don't want to worry about it moving forward. So, like you said, fingers are crossed that everything goes well with McManus. That, he actually has very similar statistics as Anders Carlson. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, that kind of hurts a little bit, right? But I honestly I do feel a little bad for Narvison. I mean, where was his? It's his wife that's from Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, Prescott or Platteville? Prescott?
Prescott, I think it was. Yeah, Prescott. Yeah, I kind of feel bad for him because his wife's family, they got to all be Packer fans, being from Prescott.
They are.
And his struggles since he became the starting kicker for the Packers and now getting cut, it's got to be rough. I mean, I would hope that his family is supportive, and I'm sure they are, but probably behind his back a little bit, they might be they might be a little frustrated with their son-in-law or their nephew-in-law, whatever.
Yeah, we all have in-laws, or we both got in-laws at least. So we're not perfect.
No.
Well, let's head on over to the Houston Texans. So I have expressed a little bit of hesitation with this Packers team in our side conversations. I think primarily due to the fact that we have yet to really beat a contender or a playoff-looking team. Week 1, I kind of throw out the window as a wash. The Vikings are clearly the toughest team we've played this season. So we've had 2 weeks here to kind of bounce back. Green Bay has won the 4 out of their last 5 games. So has the Houston Texans. And ironically, both these teams have lost the Vikings. So we enter this game, and it's got to be all systems go. And trying to just kind of putting a ribbon on the whole kicking conversation. That was really what I felt was our biggest weakness and our only weakness. When this team is healthy and they're playing their game, they're very hard to beat. That is, the Packers are very hard to beat. So hopefully this kicking situation can get together. The Packers have kind of trended upwards. What scares you the most? What do you like the most maybe about the Houston Texans? What is it about this team that intrigues you? I guess how I want to phrase it, why is this your second favorite team, if not the Buffalo Bills, a top 3 favorite team?
Yeah, I'd say this year they're probably in the top 3 favorite teams. Obviously, Packers number 1 always. But yeah, I don't know. Even last season, the strides that CJ Stroud took as a young quarterback. I mean, he was a rookie last year. So seeing him grow and have success right away last season, and then the weapons that he had around him last year were all kind of not necessarily no-name guys, but they were younger guys, lesser-known players. So you got Nico Collins. He's their top wide receiver right now, but he just went to IR. Tank Dell, he was a rookie last year as well, and he showed out last year, played really well. And obviously this year their big signing was Stefon Diggs. So they got some weapons. Well, I'm sorry. Can't forget about Joe Mixon. He was another signing that they made this year. They made a lot of moves this year that put more weapons around CJ Stroud. So I think that's part of what excited me about the team in general. And I say excited me, I mean more so put them on my radar as far as a potential playoff team. I mean, there was talk of them potentially being a Super Bowl team this year with how many weapons Stroud ended up with around him. And their defense is no slouch either. They got Danielle Hunter. He came over from the Vikings. Will Anderson is their other edge rusher. So they've got a fairly stout defense as well, especially in the pass rush. So yeah, there's just a lot of exciting things about this team that each week it has me picking them in our schedule predictions because they just they have a lot of potential. I see a lot of similarities between this Texans team and the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, you had brought up, with CJ Stroud being on his rookie contract, this is a prime example of when you don't have to pay your quarterback $55 million a year, that opens up a lot of salary cap for you to go out and get those weapons, to get a Stephon Diggs, to get a Joe Mixon and bring them to the roster and create that firepower around you. It's very similar to what we see out in San Francisco. Now, yes, McCaffrey's been hurt and they've been struggling, but because Brock Purdy only makes $900,000 a year, yeah, you heard me right, less than $1 million this season, they can go out and they can pay Bosa. They can go and pay McCaffrey. They can pay everyone else on this team. And Houston is kind of very similar in how they've structured this team with that ability to go out there and get weapons. This is going to be a challenge. So there's multiple weapons, as you've alluded to. CJ Stroud, young and up-and-coming quarterback. Him and Jordan Love made the headlines at the end of late last season with the way that they were able to make the playoffs. They both entered the playoffs as 7 seeds. I brought this up in the intro. I have no idea how this is not a Sunday night football game because this is kind of the future of the NFL before our eyes. Packers and Houston have only played 5 times prior to this, and Green Bay does own the overall record 4-1, but this is a completely different Houston Texans team than what we've seen in the last 2 decades. A lot of areas that Green Bay is going to have to be mindful of. They're going to have to do another complete game for sure. Stroud can rush if he wants to. He doesn't very often, but he has that mobility. They got a dual-headed monster in the backfield. There are weapons. I am glad, I guess would be the term I would use, to say that Nico Collins is out. He is their leading receiver, as you mentioned. So that's a big weapon that they'll have on the passing side that won't be there. But yeah, Green Bay is going to have to show up. They're going to have to show out. And I think if they can come away with this victory, as I mentioned before, this is kind of that next step for them to kind of solidify themselves as one of the best teams in the league. And it starts on Sunday against the Houston Texans. Do you have some other thoughts you want to break down into this, or you want to go into the keys of victory?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I kind of dug into preparing for this game. So the Texans are 5-1. They got one of the best records in the league right now, but that's a little deceiving. So their point differential so far this year, they're averaging 23.8 points per game, and their opponents are averaging 22.5 points per game. So there's only a 1.3 point differential in their on average this season. All but their last win against the Patriots have been decided by 6 points or less. So they're 5-1, but they've really kind of squeaked out a few of these games. So that's something that the Packers can take advantage of. The Packers defense has been, one of the tops in the league creating turnovers. That's going to be a huge thing in this game, creating turnovers. And then that kicking game, it's back to that kicking game. I think this is going to be a close one because both of these offenses are high-powered and have lots of potential. So I think it's going to be a lot of back and forth. It's probably going to be close. So making that 40-some yard field goal to get those 3 points early in the game is going to make a huge difference at the end. Their defense has been pretty solid. I think they're 3rd in the league as far as yards allowed. I think they average 177 yards per game to opponents, but they've also allowed 16 touchdowns. So they are susceptible, right? They don't allow very many yards, but they're still allowing teams to score on them, whether that be from turnovers or, mistakes that the offense makes, whatnot. But there are chinks in the armor for this Texans team. So the Packers just have to take advantage of that, and they'll come out on top.
So getting into like the keys of victory or the X factors, if you will, my biggest thing with this matchup, because it's going to be close. I agree with you 100%. It's going to be a close game. It's not going to be as relaxing as it was against the Cardinals on Sunday. This one's going to probably make the palms sweat. There's probably going to be a little bit of yelling going on with something that happens. But my biggest thing that I'm looking at this game is the Packers have to get off to a fast start. They've been kind of a second half defense for sure, but a second half team in general. We saw it against the Minnesota Vikings. If you get down in a hole early, it becomes just a challenge to claw your way back. And specifically looking at the Houston Texans, their last 2 weeks, they've scored on both of their opening drives and had 14 points by the end of the first quarter. Green Bay has to be ready to play right from the start. I have to imagine this is a focus that they are looking at heading into this game, where they have to at least keep them out of the end zone, hold them to field goals early on, if anything, give up some yards, but don't give away the whole, steak and potato meal, if you will. So if the Packers can minimize that fast start, Houston has kind of been the inverse, where they take these early leads. And like you said, they're not winning by a whole lot of points in these games that they've won. So they're kind of hanging on for dear life after those fast starts. I think they come in and they game plan really well with what they want to do early. If the Packers can mess that whole thing up again, there's so many elements. Obviously, they got to play a clean football game, no penalties, no turnovers. Hopefully I don't take all your X factors or your keys to victory, but they have to play their game. They have to show up and play, and they have to keep Houston off the board early. And I think that's how they come away with a victory, if they're going to come away with a victory on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. For me, I think if I'm going to choose an X factor or a key to victory, I'm going to go back to that kind of what I kind of already gave it away, but I'm going to go to that kicking game. Obviously, we have a new kicker. We have no idea what exactly it's going to look like. I mean, I guess we have some sort of idea because he's been with other teams previously and had success in other places around the NFL. So we kind of know a little bit more about this guy than we have the previous few kickers that we've had. But that's going to be super important this week because I feel like it's going to be such a close game. If this game's going to be decided by 3 points or less, it's going to come down to who can make that field goal, whether it be towards the beginning of the game or at the very end of the game to win it. So that's going to be my key or my X factor, is how this kicking game for the Packers is going to pan out this week.
It's so important. It's such an important and underrated position, but we have seen, I look back at the Rodgers, Mason Crosby days against Dallas. If we didn't have Mason Crosby, you're talking about heartbreak. There's some heartbreak that would have happened if we did not have a consistent kicker. So
right.
I like where your thoughts are at. I like where you're coming from.
Did you think that we'd be talking about kickers so much on this podcast when we started? I feel like we've talked about kickers more than any other position. It's crazy.
No, I didn't. No, but it's like I said, I brought it up. You have to have a good kicker.
Yeah.
It's the difference between winning a game, making the playoffs, making a Super Bowl run, whatever. Like if you don't have that, it's infuriating. So, let's get over to score predictions. I'll go first. I'll go first on this one. So Packers originally opened as 2.5-point favorites. It is now moved to 3.5-point favorites. That doesn't really change my prediction, I think, on this particular one. I do think that the Packers are looking good. They're looking strong. It's a home game. I like that it's the whiteout atmosphere. I think that entire stadium is going to be rocking. It's supposed to be 74 degrees for that kickoff, which is absolutely not a whiteout sort of atmosphere. But I do think this is the chance. I think the Packers have been kind of chomping at the bit to play an opponent that would solidify what they believe that they are. They dropped that one to Minnesota, but I think this is the one where they can actually just go out there at home with a healthy team for the most part. We got a lot of players back. So I'll quit rambling. I'll get right to it. My score prediction in this one, close game. I'm going to say 27-24. And whether that's a game-winning kick by the Packers with time expiring or it's the defense stopping them from getting down the field, I like the Packers winning by 3 in this one.
That's funny because I have the Packers winning by 3 as well.
Ooh.
I mean, to your point,
3-0.
That we just talked about how exciting and how edge of your seat this game is going to be. If it ends up being a 3-0 game, I'm going to be severely disappointed.
I mean,
Yeah, to your point, this is a whiteout game. This is a huge matchup with two young and up and coming quarterbacks in the league. It's a travesty that this is not a Sunday night football game. It really should be. I don't know why. I mean, even before the schedule came out, they had to know this was going to be a pretty marquee matchup. So it stinks that it's not in prime time, but ultimately it's still going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. Like I said, I think it's going to stay close. It's going to be back and forth. I have Green Bay nudging the Texans 31-28.
I'm okay with it.
3 points. 3 points as well. So again, it's 3 points. It's going to come down to that kicking game. That's going to be the difference maker.
You know, when we look back at week 1, you were prepared to take the Eagles in that game. And I feel like I talked you out of it, right? I just kind of want to know, I want to get a gauge here 7 weeks into the season. Do you actually feel like you'll ever pick against the Packers this year, or are you going to find a way to talk yourself into statistics and beliefs that they will find a way to win every game?
Yeah, it's super tough because as a Packer fan and as someone who, I mean, we have a Packers podcast where it's all we talk about, right? So we know the ins and outs of this team. So knowing the potential that this team has to beat anybody in the league if they play well, it's so tough to pick against them. I mean, I can't think of any matchups coming up throughout the rest of the season where right now I would say, maybe I'd pick against the Packers in this one. But it's just tough to do because we're diehard Packer fans. We know the ins and outs of this team, and they really can beat any team in the league. It's just a matter of how well they're playing and if they can play a complete game like they did last week.
Agree. That's tough to do. When I ran this podcast in 19, I picked them every single week. And luckily they won 13 games that year. So it seemed like I knew what I was talking about, but
sure,
it made my job really easy. So for those of you still hanging around, this is actually, surprise, this is our second time recording this. We recorded on Tuesday night, had a bunch of technical difficulties, surprise, surprise. So we're taking a second run at this. There will not be a full overtime episode. We'll have our score predictions and our power rankings out on Facebook here in the next couple of days. But I do want to just maybe talk about two of the bigger topics that we talked about in our overtime episode from our first recording. And that is the Detroit Lions face off against the Minnesota Vikings, and Devante Adams is now a New York Jet. I think both of those conversations produce some pretty good back and forth moments. So let's start with the other big game. It's a division game. Again, this is such a tough division that we're playing in right now. And we're going to kind of get to see whether or not the Minnesota Vikings are legitimately that powerhouse team that everyone kind of thinks they are, or if Detroit is going to be able to bounce back. And I mean that specifically about Aiden Hutchinson being out. They're not bouncing back from a loss because they absolutely destroyed the Cowboys. But it's on at the exact same time as the Packers game. We're not going to really get a chance to watch it. We're going to see highlights, I'm sure, is what's going to happen. So what's your thoughts on that particular matchup? What has you excited?
I think, I mean, it's going to be a good matchup. On paper, it's a good matchup so far. I think a big factor is going to be the health of Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones can't go this week, I think that's a huge downside for the Minnesota Vikings because we talked about it the week the Packers played the Vikings. Aaron Jones seems to be the player that kind of makes that offense go. Obviously, they have other players, other weapons. They have Justin Jefferson, who's arguably the top wide receiver in the league. But Aaron Jones kind of seemed like the engine to that offense. So if he's unable to go, I think that makes a big difference for the Vikings offense. On the Lions side of things, early in the season, I kind of voiced how I felt like they weren't necessarily clicking right away. That's not the case anymore. The Lions offense is clicking. They are playing to their top potential and they're dominant like we thought they were going to be this season. The loss of Aiden Hutchinson is a pretty big deal. He is a huge difference maker on that defense, rushing the quarterback, the sacks that he puts out. So that's a huge loss for them. But I don't think that hinders their progress that they've made so far this year. I think they continue to to dominate teams. And I really think that the Lions are going to dominate this game because I don't think Aaron Jones is going to play. I don't think he's quite healthy enough. I know it's been announced that he's week to week, but he's week to week and he avoided a long-term injury or going to IR, but I don't think he's going to be ready for this week. So with that and the way the Lions have been clicking, I really think that the Lions dominate the Vikings and the Vikings get their first loss, kind of come back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, and the Vikings are coming off of a bye week, so they kind of get a perfect storm here as far as being able to prepare and get ready for this game. But yeah, both you and I are taking the Lions in this particular matchup. I think we agree that Minnesota is going to have a coming back down to earth moment, which would be very nice because they're too high on that horse, and it's time for them to get bucked off, in my opinion.
Are you talking about the Vikings themselves or Viking fans?
Yeah, I'm talking about the fans. You're right. You called me out on it. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying.
Just wanted our viewers to know who he was talking about.
Moving over to the other big headline, though, from this week, Devante officially gets traded over from the Vegas Raiders to the New York Jets. You and I, in our conversation last night, it turned in probably to a 20-minute dissertation about how this won't make a difference for the New York Jets. Let's try to keep it to 5 minutes for the purpose of this video, but big move. They're definitely throwing all of their chips in. They get rid of Robert Saleh. I've now said that last name correct twice. Very proud of myself. They really needed that win against the Bills on Monday night. Had they won, they get a 44% chance of winning the division, but they lost, so that drops down to 17. Rodgers is on the Pat McAfee show on Tuesday. Who's behind him? Devante Adams shows up on screen right behind him. He's living with Rodgers now. So this is Aaron Rodgers' team 100% of the way. Is it going to make a difference?
No.
Is it going to make a difference?
No. I mean, as far as the Jets offense and how it works differently, yeah, I'm sure it changes some. But as far as the Jets season, I don't think it changes much. It's so crazy to me. You might as well call it the New York Rodgers, the New York Rodgers Jet. I don't know. I don't even know what you call it. You can put his face on the helmet, get rid of the Jets logo because this is Aaron Rodgers' team. I mean, we talked about how with the firing of Saleh, how Rodgers came out and said that he had nothing to do with it. He wishes him the best and blah, blah, blah. Come on. Let's be real. I mean, everyone saw that clip of Saleh coming in for a bro hug with Rodgers after I think Rodgers had thrown a touchdown, and Rodgers pushes him off, gives him the stink eye. Like, I know they came out and said, oh yeah, he's just not a hugger or whatever, but it was obvious that there was tension there, and it's not going to make a difference. And I think it's going to hurt the relationship that Rodgers has grown with Garrett Wilson, the current number one wide receiver for the Jets, because Rodgers is just going to feed Devante Adams. We saw it towards the end of the tenure of Rodgers to Adams in Green Bay. Rodgers would force the ball to Adams and refuse to throw it to other receivers, and it turned out poorly a lot of the time. So that's going to happen. He's going to force the ball into Adams. Garrett Wilson is going to lose targets. I mean, a lot of people are going to spin it. Oh, now they got two number one wide receivers. Well, there's only so many targets to go around. So one of them is going to be the number one wide receiver, and we know it's going to be Adams. So that's just going to cause tension with Garrett Wilson. The new head coach is a defensive-minded coach, so the offense really isn't going to change. I don't know. It seems so ridiculous to me. I'm rambling at this point, but
the tangent that I went into last night that I will not give you the full one. I'm sorry, you won't get the full tangent tonight, but I just don't understand why New York thinks that this is going to work, because it didn't work for the Packers. The Packers had a great head coach. They had an offensive line that could protect Rodgers, but you can't just. It didn't work then, and it's sure as hell isn't going to work out in New York. But at this point, they've paid Rodgers all this money. They've leveraged away draft picks. They pretty much are saying it has to happen. It needs to happen. we got to throw everything on the table, and this is them throwing everything on the table. We don't really have to worry about it, quite frankly. We don't play
Right.
them. They're not in our conference. If
Thank
everything
God.
goes a little
Thank God we
hunky-dory,
don't have to worry about it.
the only time we would ever have to see them is if we face off in the Super Bowl. And I hate to say it, but it's just not going to happen for the Jets. There's just going to be an absolute dumpster fire, a continued implosion. And if anything, it gives us a little bit more entertainment when the Packers aren't playing, because it's drama in New York.
So much drama that I'm so happy we are not dealing with in Green Bay anymore. So
100%.
glad we're not dealing with it.
All right, well, we were going to wrap this bad boy up. Thanks, everyone, for checking out the video. And again, hit that subscribe button, hit that comment, get yourself into the giveaway that we were throwing out there. We appreciate the support, and I pray to all things holy that this video records clean and crisp. And I'm going to spend the next 2 hours editing it. We're going to get it out. If you're watching this at 7 a.m., it's because I put a bunch of effort into getting this done here to get that. It's going to, with the support of Christian. You're there to support me, right?
Moral support, of course.
Perfect. All right, Victory Shades are back on. Let's move to 5-2 on the season, and let's see you next time on the internet. Thanks for watching.